10 years can change everything. Marcus Chin stood in his modest apartment, staring at the cream-colored invitation in his hands. The paper felt expensive between his fingers, thick and textured. Gold lettering announced a high school reunion at the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of the most exclusive venues in the city. He knew exactly who had sent this. 20 years ago, Marcus had been the quiet kid in class, the one who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation because that was all his single mother could afford, the one who brought lunch in a worn paper bag while others bought from the cafeteria, the one who stayed silent when Brandon Pierce and his crowd made their jokes. Brandon Pierce had been everything Marcus was not: tall, athletic, from a family with old money and new cars. Brandon had made high school a special kind of torture for Marcus, always with that charming smile that made teachers think he was joking when he called Marcus Charity Case or Discount Store Boy. After graduation, Marcus had disappeared from everyone's radar. No social media presence, no updates, no trace. He had kept his head down, worked hard, and built something, but nobody from high school knew that. This invitation was not about reconnection. Marcus recognized the tone, the subtle mockery in the handwritten note at the bottom. Would love to see how life has treated you. Old friend, please come. It would mean so much. Brandon, old friend. They had never been friends. Marcus sat on his threadbare couch, the springs creaking beneath him. His daughter Emma was at her grandmother's house for the weekend. At 42 years old, Marcus had been raising Emma alone since she was 2. Her mother had left, unable to handle the responsibility, unable to handle Marcus's struggles. Those early years had been brutal, working double shifts at the warehouse while taking night classes, missing Emma's first words because he was loading trucks, celebrating her birthdays with homemade cakes because store-bought ones cost too much. Every dollar had a destination, and none of those destinations were frivolous. But something had changed 5 years ago. Marcus had always been good with numbers, patterns, seeing connections others missed. During those night classes, he had developed software to help small warehouses optimize their logistics. It was simple, practical, born from his own frustrations at work. He had not expected anyone to care, but one warehouse manager had shared it with another. Then a small business owner had reached out, then a regional chain. The software had spread quietly, effectively, solving real problems for real people. Marcus had improved it, refined it, turned it into something remarkable. 2 years ago, a major logistics corporation had noticed. They had wanted to buy his software, integrate it into their systems. Marcus had negotiated carefully, remembering every lesson poverty had taught him about the value of what you build. The sale had been significant, life-changing, but Marcus had not changed his life much. He still lived modestly, still drove a used car, still shopped with coupons. The money sat mostly untouched, invested carefully, a security blanket against ever returning to those desperate years. Emma had a college fund now. They had health insurance. The refrigerator stayed full. But he did not advertise any of this. Looking at the invitation again, Marcus made a decision, not for himself, but for every kid who had ever been made to feel small, for every single parent working 3 jobs, for everyone who had been counted out and dismissed. He picked up his phone and made a call. "Richard, it is Marcus. Remember that favor you mentioned? I need to collect." Richard Hartwell had been one of Marcus's first clients, a luxury car collector who had used Marcus's software for his import business. They had become unlikely friends, bonded by mutual respect and Richard's appreciation for people who built things rather than inherited them. "Anything," Richard said warmly. "What do you need?" "I need to borrow the Phantom for Saturday evening." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "The Rolls Royce?" "Marcus, you are full of surprises." "Of course, but you will tell me this story afterward." Saturday arrived with autumn rain that cleared by evening, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Marcus stood in his bedroom, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored suit. He had purchased it that morning, his first truly expensive clothing. The fabric felt foreign, luxurious, nothing like the work clothes or department store specials he was accustomed to. Emma had helped him pick it out. At 12, She had her mother's eye for style and her father's practical sense. Get the Navy? One, Dad. It makes you look like a CEO. She had no idea how prophetic those words were. Marcus had started his own company 18 months ago, expanding beyond the original software into consulting and development. The Rolls Royce Phantom sat in front of his building like a magnificent ship. Pristine white, paint gleamed under the streetlights. Chrome fixtures caught and reflected the world around it. The spirit of ecstasy hood ornament pointed forward like a compass to dignity. Richard's driver, Thomas, stood beside it in full uniform. Mr. Chun, Thomas nodded with genuine respect. Shall we? The interior smelled of leather and quiet luxury. Marcus sank into seats more comfortable than his own bed. As they pulled away from his modest building, he watched his neighborhood slide past the windows. Mrs. Park watering her small garden. The Martinez boys playing basketball under the streetlight. His world, unchanged by what he had achieved. The Grand Meridian Hotel rose 30 stories above the city center. Valets in burgundy uniforms directed traffic under the grand entrance canopy. Expensive cars lined up, disgorging well-dressed passengers. Mercedes, BMWs, a few Teslas. Nice cars for successful people. Then the Phantom arrived. Conversations paused. The Rolls Royce moved with mechanical grace to the entrance, its presence undeniable. It was not just expensive. It was a statement, a declaration, something that spoke of success at a different magnitude. Heads turned. People whispered. Thomas opened a door with practiced elegance. Marcus stepped out, and for just a moment, he felt every eye on him. The quiet kid, the charity case, the one they had forgotten about or assumed had disappeared into obscurity. He straightened his suit jacket and walked toward the entrance. The hotel lobby was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors. A string quartet played softly near the fountain. Former classmates clustered in groups, drinks in hand, updating each other on careers and families. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Then someone noticed him. Is that Marcus Chen? The voice carried, uncertain. Others turned. Recognition dawned on some faces, confusion on others. Marcus walked through the lobby with quiet confidence, acknowledging no one yet, heading toward the ballroom. Brandon Pierce stood near the entrance, holding court with his usual crowd. He had aged well, Marcus noted. Still handsome, still projecting that easy confidence that came from never having to worry. His suit was expensive, but not quite as expensive as Marcus's. He had not noticed Marcus yet, too absorbed in his own story about some business deal. Marcus Chen, Marcus said simply as he approached. Brandon turned, and his expression was priceless. First confusion, then recognition, then something calculating. He had expected Marcus to arrive beaten down, shabby, confirming all his assumptions about who deserved success. Marcus, Brandon recovered quickly, that old smile returning. You came. I was not sure you would. Saw you pulled up in quite the car. The Phantom? Yes, I borrowed it from a friend. Seemed appropriate for the occasion. A friend, Brandon repeated, skepticism barely hidden. That is generous. Richard is generous. He is one of my clients, actually. We have worked together for years. Something flickered in Brandon's eyes. This was not going as planned. Clients? What do you do? I develop logistics software. Started my own company about 18 months ago. Before that, I sold my original software to Transglobal Logistics. Perhaps you have heard of them. Brandon had definitely heard of them. Everyone in business had. They were massive, international, worth billions. His smile became more strained. You sold software to Transglobal? Not to them. I sold them the software itself. They integrated it into their global operations. It worked out well for everyone. The crowd around Brandon had gone quiet, listening. Former classmates who remember Marcus as the poor kid were recalculating, reassessing. Sarah Martinez, who had been in advanced math with Marcus, spoke up. Marcus, that is incredible. I had no idea you went into software development. I went into survival first, Marcus said honestly. Software came later. After my daughter was born, I needed flexibility that factory work could not provide. So I taught myself to code during her nap times. You have a daughter? Sarah asked warmly. Emma. She is 12. Brilliant. Funny. Everything good in my life. And her mother? Brandon could not help himself, looking for the weakness, the failure. Not in the picture. I have raised Emma myself since she was 2-inch. Brandon's smile turned triumphant, as if single parenthood was a failure he had been searching for. That must have been difficult. I cannot imagine managing alone. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, Marcus agreed. It was also the most important. Emma deserved a parent who showed up, who kept trying, who taught her that circumstances do not define you. I hope I have been that. I am sure you have, Sarah said, shooting Brandon a look. Being a present parent is worth more than anything. The evening continued with that strange energy. Former classmates approached Marcus, some with genuine curiosity, others with the transparent motivation of people who smell opportunity. He answered questions patiently, shared his story without embellishment or false modesty. Yes, he had struggled. Yes, he had worked warehouse jobs while raising his daughter. Yes, he had built something from nothing. Dinner was served in the grand ballroom. Marcus found himself seated at a table with Sarah, her husband David, and several other former classmates who had been kind to him in school or at least neutral. Brandon was at the head table, watching. Can I ask you something? David leaned in during dessert. Why did you come tonight? Brandon's invitation. We all knew what it was. He has been talking for weeks about how he invited you to show everyone what happens to people who do not apply themselves. Marcus considered the question carefully. I almost did not come. For weeks that invitation sat on my counter, and I thought about throwing it away. Who needs to revisit high school? Who wants to give Brandon the satisfaction? So why did you? Sarah asked gently. For my daughter. Emma knows from my story, the struggles, the hard years. But she does not really understand yet what poverty feels like, how it makes you invisible. I wanted to show her that you can face people who made you feel small and stand tall, not because of money or success, but because you know your own worth. She is not here, though, David observed. No, but I will tell her about tonight. I will tell her that I walked into a room full of people who once dismissed me, and I did not need their validation. I already had everything that mattered. The car, the suit, even success, those are just props. The real victory is that I built a good life for my daughter and myself despite everything working against us. Sarah's eyes were bright. That is beautiful, Marcus. It is honest, he corrected gently. The speeches came after dinner. Brandon stood at the podium, talking about success and achievement, making subtle digs at people who had not lived up to their potential. Several times his eyes drifted to Marcus, clearly frustrated that his intended victim was not cooperating with the narrative. Finally, Brandon called Marcus to the stage. I think we should hear from Marcus-chan. Many of us remember him from our school days. Marcus, come share your journey with us. It was meant to be humiliating, putting Marcus on the spot. But Marcus walked to the podium with calm confidence. He looked out at the faces, some friendly, some curious, some still carrying that old dismissive expression. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate the invitation, even if I understand the spirit in which it was given. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Brandon's smile froze. 20 years ago, I was a kid many of you did not notice. I wore cheap clothes, brought paper bag lunches, did not get invited to parties. Some of you were kind anyway. Thank you for that. Some of you were not. I have forgiven that too. Marcus paused, letting the words settle. After graduation, I disappeared because I was busy surviving. My mother got sick. I worked to support us. Then I became a father unexpectedly and a single parent shortly after. I worked night shifts loading trucks and took classes during the day when Emma was with my mother. For years, I lived paycheck to paycheck, one emergency away from disaster. The room was completely silent now. During those years, I learned something important. Success is not about where you start or how much money you make. It is about showing up for what matters. I showed up for my mother until she passed. I showed up for my daughter every single day. I showed up for myself, refusing to believe that my circumstances were my ceiling. The software I developed came from frustration, from seeing inefficiency and knowing there was a better way. I shared it freely at first because helping others felt good. Eventually, it became something bigger, something that could support my family, and then some. But the money was never the point. Marcus looked directly at Brandon. I came tonight because you invited me expecting to find failure. You wanted everyone to see that the poor kid stayed poor, confirming your worldview that success belongs to people like you. But Brandon, I did not come to prove anything to you. I came to remind myself that your opinion never mattered. The only opinions that matter are from people who show up when times are hard. I drive a 15-year-old Honda most days. I live in a modest apartment. I shop with coupons in comparison shop for Emma's school supplies. Not because I have to anymore, but because those habits kept us alive when we had nothing. They remind me of what matters. Tonight I borrowed an expensive car and wore an expensive suit because I wanted to make a point. Not about wealth, but about assumptions. You assumed you knew my story. You assumed my value. You assumed that someone who started with nothing would end with nothing. You were wrong. Marcus stepped back from the podium. The real success of my life is not the software or the money. It is Emma, who is kind and curious and confident. It is the work I do that helps small businesses operate more efficiently, creating jobs and opportunity. It is a life I built from nothing but determination and hope. That is worth more than any car or any reunion. The applause started slowly, then built. Sarah and David stood first, then others joined. Not everyone, but enough. Marcus returned to his seat, feeling lighter than he had in years. Brandon did not approach him for the rest of the evening. After the formal program ended and people mingled, Marcus found himself surrounded by former classmates who wanted to reconnect genuinely. Sarah shared photos of her 3 children. David talked about his work as a teacher. Others opened up about their own struggles, divorces, career setbacks, the messy reality behind their polished exteriors. We all pretend everything is perfect. A woman named Jennifer admitted. She had been popular in school, homecoming queen, everything easy. But my marriage fell apart last year. I have been living in my sister's basement with my kids, starting over at 40. Your speech reminded me that starting over is not failure. It is not, Marcus agreed. It is courage. As the evening wound down, Marcus prepared to leave. Thomas waited with the Phantom, ready to return Marcus to his real life. But before he could exit, Brandon appeared, slightly drunk, his polished veneer cracked. You think you are better than me now. Brandon's voice was loud enough to turn heads. No, Marcus said honestly. I think we are both human beings who made different choices. I do not need to be better than you. Brandon, I just need to be good enough for the people who depend on me. You came here to embarrass me. I came here to face you. There's a difference. You've been a ghost in my head for 20 years, representing every person who made me feel worthless. Tonight, I realized you were never that powerful. You were just a hurt kid taking out on someone you perceived as weaker. I forgive you for that. Brandon stared at him, anger and something else, maybe regret, warring in his expression. I did not need your forgiveness. I know. I gave it anyway because carrying anger is exhausting. I have a daughter to raise and a business to run. I do not have energy for old grudges. Marcus extended his hand. After a long moment, Brandon shook it. His grip was weak, defeated. Marcus felt only sadness for him, for the man who peaked in high school and never learned to measure success by anything other than the wrong metrics. The drive home was quiet. Thomas navigated the late-night streets, while Marcus watched the city slide past. They passed the warehouse where he had worked those brutal overnight shifts, the community college where he had taken classes, the park where he had pushed Emma on swings during lunch breaks between jobs. His neighborhood welcomed him back unchanged. The Phantom looked absurd parked in front of his building. A spaceship landed in the wrong world. Marcus thanked Thomas, returned to his modest apartment, and carefully hung up his expensive suit. In the morning, he would return to his jeans and his Honda and his real life. But something had shifted. He called Emma at his mother-in-law's house despite the late hour. "Dad, Is everything okay? Her voice was sleepy, concerned. Everything is perfect, sweetheart. I just wanted to tell you I love you, and that you can face anything life throws at you if you remember your worth does not come from other people's opinions. Did the reunion go okay? It went exactly as it needed to. I will tell you all about it tomorrow. Sleep well. Emma, love you too, Dad. Marcus stood in his small kitchen, making tea, feeling genuinely content. The reunion had not been about revenge or validation. It had been about closure, about finally releasing the power those old wounds had held. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Thank you for tonight. Your speech reminded me why I became a therapist, to help people see their own strength. Let us have coffee sometime. I think Emma and my daughter Sophia would get along. More messages followed from other classmates. Real connections, not networking opportunities. People responding to honesty, to vulnerability, to the courage it takes to show up as yourself. The next morning, Marcus picked up Emma. She bounced into the car full of stories about her weekend with her grandmother. He listened, smiled, felt grateful for this ordinary moment. Later, over pancakes at their favorite diner, he told her about the reunion. So you showed up in a fancy car just to prove you were successful? Emma asked, skeptical in the way 12-year-olds can be. No, I showed up in a fancy car to prove I was not ashamed. There is a difference. I am not ashamed of where we came from or how hard things were. Those experiences made me who I am. They made us who we are. Did the bully guy apologize? Not exactly. But I do not need his apology anymore. I needed to prove to myself that his opinion never mattered. Emma considered this. Syrup dripping from her fork. That is actually pretty cool, Dad. You are pretty cool, Emma. Everything good in my life comes from you. That is sappy, she said, but she was smiling. Life returned to its rhythm. Marcus worked on new software developments, consulted with clients, picked them up from school, helped with homework, made dinner. The reunion became a story they told, a reminder that you can face your past and move forward stronger. 3 months later, Marcus received an unexpected message. Brandon Pierce wanted to meet for coffee. Marcus almost deleted it, but something made him accept. They met at a neutral coffee shop. Both men awkward in civilian clothes, stripped of the armor they had worn at the reunion. I have been going to therapy, Brandon said without preamble. My wife insisted after the reunion. She said I embarrassed myself and her. She was right. Marcus sipped his coffee and waited. I peaked in high school, Brandon continued. Everything since has been trying to recapture that feeling of being on top, being important. I inherited my father's business, but I did not build anything. I just maintained it. And I have been angry about that, taking out on people who reminded me of my own inadequacy. I reminded you of inadequacy? Marcus was genuinely puzzled. You were poor but smart. I was rich but average. I needed you to fail to prove that money and status mattered more than intelligence or hard work. When you succeeded despite everything, it destroyed my worldview. Brandon, I did not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know I am sorry. For high school, for the invitation, for everything. You deserve better. Marcus felt the last piece of old anger dissolve. Thank you. That means something. They talked for another hour. 2 men in their 40s trying to make peace with who they had been and who they had become. It was not friendship, not exactly, but it was resolution. When they parted, Marcus felt lighter, freer, ready to move forward without the weight of old pain. Years would pass, and Marcus's company would continue to grow. Emma would graduate high school with honors, get into an excellent college, pursue engineering. The money Marcus had earned would send her there debt-free, giving her the freedom he never had. But the reunion would remain a turning point. The night Marcus walked into a room full of ghosts and walked out free. The night he proved to himself that success is measured in love and integrity, not luxury cars or validation from people who never really knew you. On Emma's college graduation day, she would thank him in her speech. My dad taught me that where you start does not determine where you finish. That kindness matters more than status. That showing up every day for the people you love is the only success that really matters. Marcus would cry, of course. And he would think back to that reunion, to the scared kid he had been, to the man he had become, not because of money or software or proving anyone wrong, but because he had loved his daughter fiercely and built life on foundation of integrity. That was the real story. Not the Rolls Royce or the expensive suit, but the choices made in small apartments and late-night worry sessions and early morning pancakes. The choice to keep going when everything was hard. The choice to measure success by what you give, not what you gain. And in the end, that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories about resilience, redemption, and the quiet courage of everyday people. Leave a comment sharing your own story of overcoming adversity. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Together, we can remind each other that our worth is not determined by where we start, but by how we choose to move forward.